Welcome to this explainer. Okay, picture this. It's 2:13 a.m. A guy named Jake is driving home through a small town in Ohio. He decides to take a shortcut down Blackwood Road, which, is one of those pitch black roads locals absolutely refuse to drive down at night. Suddenly, his car just dies, completely dead. He pulls out his phone, zero signal. He looks up and sees this old, abandoned-looking house by the side of the road. And standing in the window is a little girl just staring at him in dead silence. Jake walks up to ask for help, and the front door just slowly swings open on its own. He steps inside, looks at some old photos on the wall, and his blood runs totally cold. It's the same little girl from the window, but the photo is dated 1987. Obviously, Jake books it out of there. He jumps back in his car, it miraculously starts, and as he's speeding away, he checks his rearview mirror. The girl is now standing dead center in the middle of the road. And she's holding up a photograph of him. The date written at the bottom, August 18th, 2026, tomorrow. That creeping dread? That's what we're talking about today. We're going to break down exactly how American ghost stories evolved from early folklore all the way to the incredibly complex digital rendering and sound design techniques used to scare us in modern media. It's a wild ride, so buckle up. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever actually stopped to wonder how a piece of machinery, specifically the automobile, completely rewired our collective fears? Like, how did the sudden appearance of fast-moving cars on dirt roads over a century ago fundamentally shape the exact visual and audio tricks that filmmakers and game developers use to terrify us right now? Here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at the ghosts of the open road, then meet America's spectral motorists. After that, we'll transition into the modern tools used to build these scares, lighting the darkness, rendering the eerie fog, and the sound of terror. Finally, we'll look at technology adapting our fears. I promise you, by the end of this, the connection between 19th century American expansion and complex atmospheric algorithms is going to make perfect sense. Section 1. Ghosts of the Open Road and the Rapid Expansion of America. To really understand why the automobile was so terrifying, we first have to understand the landscape it was driving into. America was expanding at an absolutely breakneck pace. I mean, think about it. Columbus arrives in 1492, we get a fledgling nation by 1776, and then boom, in 1803, the Louisiana Purchase literally doubles the size of the country overnight for $15 million. By the 1840s, a massive influx of settlers pushing west meant the United States stretched from sea to sea. What this incredibly rapid expansion created was a vast continent crisscrossed by thousands of miles of totally isolated, pitch-black, rural dirt roadways. It was the perfect, terrifying stage for the very first automobile legends to be born. Section 2. America's Spectral Motorists and the Birth of the Phantom Car.
So, into this vast, dark, and incredibly quiet landscape, the automobile roars into existence, and with it, a brand new type of terror. For tight-knit communities used to the slow pace of horse-drawn carriages, the car was deeply unsettling. Strangers, or even criminals, could now appear out of absolutely nowhere, strike, and vanish into the night at unbelievable speeds. This intense rural anxiety very quickly warped into the fantastical. Consider some of these actual historical accounts. Back in 1905, Pittsburgh police reported a mysterious, muffled woman in a white touring car racing through the cemetery at breakneck speeds every dark night. In 1909, Nebraska farmers were terrified by what they called a phantom white Buick No. 10 that would tear over the hills before vanishing into thin air. And perhaps the most chilling? In 1920s Los Angeles, people swore there was a phantom hearse that would glide onto the scene of fatal highway accidents and just whisk the corpses away at high speed. The phantom automobile had officially become the central anchor of 20th century American myth.
Section 3. Lighting the darkness and recreating the midnight road. Let's see how this builds into modern media. How do today's creators capture that exact creeping dread of a dark 1900s dirt road? Well, it all starts with the lighting. Independent creators like Camp Films break down this visual construction brilliantly. You don't use standard three-point lighting. Instead, step 1 is to use a single key light. This instantly cranks up the contrast and casts these deep, moldable shadows across the subject's face. Step 2 is absolutely crucial: backlighting. Placing your light source behind the subject facing the camera creates stark, moody silhouettes. You are literally forcing the audience to see the darkness that inhabits the scene. And finally, step 3, you use background practical lights. Think of a distant lantern or a weak flickering headlight. It doesn't illuminate the space, it just gives a terrifying sense of scale to the total emptiness around the subject. Section 4. Rendering the eerie fog and the math behind the mist.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that lighting is honestly only half the visual battle. To really sell the atmosphere of a phantom encounter, you need to simulate the environment, specifically the fog that those headlights are trying to pierce through. And in digital environments like video games, this requires some serious heavy lifting. Think about the sheer math required to make fog look scary. Developer Bart Bronsky gave a fantastic presentation on this regarding volumetric fog. To realistically simulate atmospheric scattering, developers use a complex equation called the Hennu-Greenstein phase function. By tweaking a variable called the anisotropy factor, represented by the letter G, they control exactly how light scatters through the virtual mist. Changing that G value transforms the fog from a thick, blinding wall into a thin, creeping haze. They are literally using complex equations to mathematically calculate how much dread to visually project onto your screen.
And this brings up another major hurdle in rendering scares, actually eliminating the shadows within that fog. If you render digital fog without any ambient or global skylight, it just looks artificially dark and completely flat. But when developers utilize advanced algorithms like zonal spherical harmonics to calculate how ambient light outscatters and inscatters through the mist, the result is completely different. The fog hiding in those shadowed areas suddenly looks incredibly realistic and three-dimensional. It actually feels like a real physical place where a phantom car could emerge at any second.
Section 5. The sound of terror and building auditory dread.
Okay, so we have the shadowy lighting and we have the mathematically perfect fog, but a visual is nothing without the final essential layer, the sound design. Audio is quite literally how you physically manipulate the viewer's nervous system. Professional sound designers categorize the tools of terror into two main camps, risers and stingers. Simply put, risers are the gradual, building sounds that slowly ramp up the tension, while stingers are the short, sharp, explosive auditory hits that actually deliver the jump scare. Professional horror mixer Joe Dubin explains this dynamic perfectly. You use risers, like metallic screeching strings or highly unsettling reverse reverb effects, to basically load the audience. You are putting them on high alert, creating an unbearable sense of anticipation. Then, just when they least expect it, bam! You drop the stinger. A massive thud, a stabbing synth note, or a sharp tick. As Dubin points out, just seeing a doorknob rattle isn't inherently terrifying visually, but when you punctuate it with a massive audio stinger, the moment becomes truly chilling. It is essentially an auditory ambush. Section 6. Technology adapting our fears and folklore in the digital age. Which brings this whole explainer full circle. We've gone from the sudden mechanical ambush of an early 1900s phantom automobile to the meticulously calculated visual and auditory ambushes of modern digital horror. So the crucial point is summarized perfectly by scientist and folklorist Jacques Vallée. When comparing modern UFO sightings to ancient fairy lore back in 1969, he observed that whatever these phenomena or psychological projections are, they, quote, keep pace with human technology. The fear of the unknown on a dark road is totally timeless, but as we upgraded from horses to cars, our ghosts simply upgraded to phantom white Buicks. And as our media continues to evolve, our ability to render those phantoms with mathematical lighting and synthesized sound only gets more precise. It turns out, our folklore evolves right alongside our machines. We constantly use our newest technology to understand and even recreate our oldest fears. So I want to leave you with this final thought. As our technology pushes even further into immersive virtual reality and generative environments, what exactly will our next phantom vehicles look like? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.